Does that work? Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. My name is Patrick Fisher. I'm the director here at the National World Museum. Welcome, intrepid adventurers. Thank you for joining us tonight for Twilight Muster. This is the second of our first three Twilight Muster evenings, a program that we are hoping will continue on well past the first three nights. And judging on how many of you were here, looks like it's a pretty good crowd and it will be a pretty good program for us. So thank you for being part of the first of these programs. Tonight you are here for big cats, bunyips, and sea serpents. And if you pardon me, I have to put my glasses on because I'm at that point in my life now. Welcome to an evening, a good evening with some friends and some food and some good conversation and debate and beer. You know, what could really be better, I think. A couple of housekeeping issues. If any of you need to get out and leave the building during the talk and you want to come back in, please find one of the members of staff. There are only a few of us here tonight. We have our name tags on. Please find us because the door will lock behind you, and either you won't be able to get back in or you'll have to ring the doorbell, which will be an interesting sound because it kind of chimes throughout the building. So that's the first housekeeping. Second housekeeping, if anybody needs the restrooms, you can get to them by just going down, following this glass wall here, down to the end of the hallway there, or down the ramp, and off to the left-hand side. Other restrooms down there as well. Let's see, is there anything else I've forgotten on housekeeping issues? I don't think. Again, the third of these three evenings will be on Thursday, the 19th of September, when we do They Left Nothing But Footprints with Barry Abley and Dr. Bob Marmion, talking about some interesting stories from the region, such as did the Japanese make a landing on Queenscliff during the Second World War. So again, that'll be on Thursday, the 19th of September. A few thank yous and welcomes here. I want to thank Luke and his team from Prickly Moses Brewery and Otway Estate Wines for sponsoring our refreshing and themed beverages this evening. So thank you, Luke, for being here tonight. And then Claire and her team from Pink Saffron, the team that's providing our delectable victuals, as my family would say back home. To Sarah and Phil and the rest of the museum team, thank you for making these magical evenings happen. Without them, the rest of us wouldn't be here. So thank you for Sarah, wherever she is, for arranging this and making it all happen. And then finally, thank you to our speakers who are joining us here this evening, because we greatly appreciate their support and their effort to come out and join us and support not only the museum and the Rumour Hazard exhibition, but the Geelong community as well. So thank you to you who are here, and Malcolm, who I think is off in the back. So I will not prattle on too much longer. Again, thank you for being here. Big cats, bunyips, and sea serpents. A night with the crypts, as I like to call it, or the crypto. At least somebody laughed when I said that. The cryptozoologists, which I think is an absolutely fascinating word, and it took me months to remember how to say that word and exactly what that word meant. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the word, I'm going to educate you. For those of you who are familiar, sorry for boring you, and if I get anything wrong on the definition of the word, I'm sure I will be happily corrected, won't I? So cryptozoologists, from the Greek, kryptos meaning hidden, zoon meaning animal, and logos meaning knowledge, or more appropriately, the pursuit of knowledge. So literally it translates to the study of hidden animals, which I just absolutely think is really fascinating, and really it's charming and it's exciting, and I love it, and this is a program that I can't wait to hear. So, that said, we'll move right into it. Black Panthers and Otway Ranges Enigma, Simon Townsend. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about you before you, so don't get in such a hurry. You're going to be up here in a few minutes. So, God, push it. It's like you came here to see them. Really? Okay. So, a rare species unto himself, I would say. His bio says that he is a man with a lifelong passion for collecting reports about out-of-place animals, especially predators in Australasia. What he really is an anti-authoritarian, a rebel who defies convention, and this is something that goes way back to Warburton when he was 17. And I will say if I was 17 in Warburton, I would be seeing all kinds of strange creatures and have a bit of an anti-social streak myself. Way back when he was 17, he had an experience when he saw an animal that the authorities denied existed, a black panther. Are you sure it wasn't just a mutant leadbetter possum? No? No. As a result of this experience, he developed a lifelong relationship with the renowned investigator of unknown animals, the late zoologist Dr. Bernard Heuvelmans. Did I pronounce that correctly? Okay. Along the way, he decided it would probably be better to interact with these animals if they were in captivity. So, as one does, he went to work for the Melbourne Zoo. So fast forward 40 years, and here he is tonight with a lifetime of research inspired by actual experience and the animals who those blasted autocrats continue to claim do not exist. So with that said, Simon Townsend and the Black Panthers of the Otway Ranges.
Thanks very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't really need it, actually.
No, you don't.
Well, I was about to commence with exactly what Patrick was talking about, which is my history of why I started to investigate this phenomenon. But I suppose there was a little bit more to it than simply catching up with a fleeting glimpse of an animal that wasn't supposed to be where it was. What had actually happened that sort of set the scene was there was a report, it actually wound up in the newspapers, of a so-called Black Panther charging a group of workers who were clearing bush along a conduit, which is a major pipeline, maybe some 2 metres in diameter, at running along the country to the, I think it was to the east of the waters, in a long, clear passageway through the bush to allow it to be managed. Now, what transpired was that a chap that I spent a lot of time with, he was a really good ornithologist and was teaching me quite a lot. He went and got me and a pretty good pal to travel up with him for a bit of moral support, just to have a look at the area where this was supposed to have taken place. And it was a lark. I mean, it was interesting, but I wasn't taking it that seriously. As we progressed along this long, windy bush track along the actual pipeline, we surmounted a little ridge. On that ridge, there was an animal as big as that stuffed toy that I brought in tonight. Now, that stuffed toy plays a small part in 5 or 10 minutes from what I have to say. But it was about that size, so that gives you some impression. An animal that probably weighs as much as I did when I was 17, which is probably half of what I weigh today. That's by the by. This particular animal was not only big, it was intensely muscular, glossy black, and it had, without a doubt, the most malevolent look in its face I've ever seen any other animal have. We disturbed it. They're lying up in the afternoon sunshine, it was winter, so the sun itself, and it tried to get away in a very, very curious manner. I'd never really thought about this sort of thing before, but this animal was doing what you see your own cat do when it stalks sparrows on the back lawn. It was doing that belly crawl, but it was so muscular and its shoulder blades were so powerfully built, if you like, you could actually split it like the blades of an axe going up and down as it tried to get away. Total viewing time was probably only a few seconds, but it was very, very close. About the back row of the audience tonight from me. And that's close, believe me, to a disturbed wild animal that's any size. You could get a pretty good look at it. And then the grass was short, the sunshine was on, and I was already with a wildlife. I had a reasonably good idea what I was looking at. And remember, there were 2 other witnesses with me as well. It was gone in a flash, into heavy cover, and we said to one another, now what? What else can you do? I made notes, but I started to get very serious about collecting data on these animals. initially newspaper searches, because that's all you could do in those days, with actual little cuttings from newspapers that I either got, or I used my very limited resources to purchase from a news agency. By news agency, I mean a real news agency, somebody that sold information from newspapers. My paper files became voluminous. I entered into correspondence with certain people, particularly Dr. Herman, who, God bless him, was really helpful and encouraging to me. And he taught me the value of collecting pertinent information and complete information. That's when I began to treat this as a component part of, if you like, zoology. This is science. It's not complete, but it is science because we're collecting data. It's not a matter of judging what we think might be there because we have that specimen to know what we're actually dealing with. But at least the consistency of reportage of so-called black panthers through southeastern Australia, and not just the Otways, but especially the Otways because that's my main area of research. It's been so consistent and it's been so, how should we put it? It's almost developed seasonal patterns of people making reports. In summertime, of course, the roads through our tremendous Otway National Park are pretty thick with tourist cars at all strange times of the day and night. And we have annually some dozens of reports coming from those areas. A lot of people make a mistake. They see a small problem. First time ever, probably for a lot of them, and they make a mistake. Other people see a feral cat, possibly a fox with shadows across it, and they get confused about what they've seen. But because it's now in the public psyche, this concept of there being a panther out there, or panthers as I would much prefer to speak about it, these people are reporting honestly. Some people hoax, but that's a different scenario, and if I say so myself, through the CSI stuff, you can catch these guys out. They make mistakes. They make big mistakes. Their reportage is just too good. And I don't really sort of have to waste time. I'm not fascinated by hoaxes and the whole concept of hoaxing. That's where our little friend here comes in. About 15 years ago, a fellow who's now deceased, so I won't mention names, of course, at all. I won't even mention where he was living. But he was in the Otways and he was a publican. Now there's lots of places you can be a publican throughout and in the Otways. But he was a well-known wag. What he did, he set up one of the best imitation panthers I've ever seen, and he took a very convincing photograph through vegetation of that cat. But a classic mistake. He got so carried away with his own brilliance, he took several photographs of that cat from all sorts of angles. In other words, the cat was clearly very used to being photographed, or it was dead, one or the other. And I showed it to, once again, somebody I can't name, but he was a government officer in conservation. And he was very intrigued because he was interested in this phenomenon as well. But we all tweaked at the same time. We've got all these pictures of an animal that's just too good to be true. So with his badgers and dogs and his uniform on, he decided to pop down and have a chat with the party who supplied this series of photographs. And it took some finding, but we caught up, or he caught up with him. I didn't want to get involved in what could be an unpleasant incident. And so the story ran. They put the fear of God into him. And the fellow said, well, it doesn't mean I haven't seen one. And he claimed absolutely that he had seen one very close to it, to that spot. But because we were getting comments ourselves by being in the newspaper occasionally, he thought he'd one up us. And it was a pretty good job, Now today, with the sophistication of the internet, there's heaps of attempts to hoax. Once again, they're usually pretty easy to, not pretty easy, I shouldn't say that, but we're more than capable of working out what's what. Now, the vast majority of reportage, as I say, is from honest people who mean well. But site reports are one thing. I'm much more interested in collecting data on stock killing and wildlife killing, and that's an area where you might have a dozen experts who also have a dozen opinions. That can be people who might be particularly skilled in research on big cats from overseas, people from Department of Conservation here specialising in dog killing, stock, etc. If you even get two blokes from the one department, they'll have a different opinion. And it's a very imprecise area of data and collection, but at least everybody's trying. What we found here is that with tourists seeing cats through summer, in winter time, and it's pretty tough in Otway, it's very cold and very wet, we're seeing increased stock predation around the boundaries of the Otways themselves. Dogs have a tendency to give themselves away. Tracks are an obvious thing in wet weather, and dog tracks are reasonably easy to identify. With the cats, we've only ever seen very few decent, indisputable tracks, and at that time we weren't sophisticated enough to record them appropriately. Today, I wouldn't be bothered with plaster casting. The quality of photography, digital photography, is such that we can make really good photographs of tracks when and where they occur. Tracks don't show up very often, and because of that, it's really, it's not slapdash, but it's more a happy chance that you might find a track. The kills, however, are another issue. Excuse me. We've persisted in staying in good relationships with a number of pastoralists around the Otways, and these guys have learned how to keep hands off if they've got something interesting, cover it up, give us a call, and we collect material that we can supply to the University of Canberra DNA unit, who are prepared at their cost, because they believe this to be a serious issue, at their cost to analyse material that we take from kills. Sounds easy, it isn't. Quite frequently, when an animal's killed and eaten, you get secondary predation by foxes and feral cats especially, but also what a lot of people forget is by birds, especially ravens and crows. They are onto a kill the minute it's taken. That's a bit of a nuisance, because what we know that we have major predators, but we haven't been able to identify any of them to date. I think submitted about 22 samples in the last 12 months, and we weren't able to get anything back other than the secondary predation identifications. But I'm very pleased to see that the University of Canberra is supporting us all the way. It costs around $500–600 per piece of analytical work to be done. They're paying for it, not us. So that's a real bonus. We may crack this one, but we don't know. I persist with the rumours, if you like, of this particular phenomenon, because of the number of people I've discussed it with, the number of people who have been wholeheartedly honest about describing what they've seen, and also who've been brave enough to describe their visceral response to something that was really frightening. Really frightening. I'm not going to say what we have got. Black panther doesn't mean anything really. Panther is almost a generic word for a medium-sized big cat. And the fact that these animals are black, it may well be that we've got a naturally breeding population of black leopards. But there's no proof yet. We need a specimen. That specimen can be DNA. And remember, if you had the good fortune to read my book, with Dr. Walter here, we talk about one particular example of positive leopard identification here in Victoria. Now, I won't tell you exactly where, but it's in the eastern Otways, and that's a stunner. When the state government decided that it would put something in the press about this phenomenon last year, Dr. Peter Menkhorst was engaged to be the prime mover for the study. Dr. Menkhorst was given very, very, very limited capabilities to get information. So the first thing, I've known Peter for years, we're friends. We got together, I told him everything I knew, everything. And he used me as a resource for his study. But the reality of it was, the only piece of solid evidence that we've got so far that carries weight is that one leopard scat. But that one leopard scat came from property of a reputable, knowledgeable sheep jockey who had lost far too many sheep and was at his wit's end on what to do. When you start losing sheep at the rate of 2 a week, it doesn't sound much. You might think, oh, farmer's got plenty of sheep. It's like you tearing up $50 and $100 bills. It's just not on. And no, most people can't afford to insure their stock. So, of course, they get a little bit, you know, self-righteous and a bit angry. Anyway, the chap that this was happening to, like me, he's persisted in purchasing, whenever he can, state-of-the-art wildlife cameras that can be left in remote places, possibly baited with something interesting to attract predators. And we once again feel that working together, you know, stepping stones, we're getting there, but it's not easy. And we only persist because, you know, we have this heartfelt desire to see other people vindicated and also to work out what's happening in stock. I mean, we may have a situation here where you've got a very low population number of a fairly substantial predator occurring. Now, this is where it really, to me, gets sort of interesting if you want to draw a map. From the Penola region of South Australia, consistently through the Cordillera of the Great Dividing Range through Victoria and offshoots like the Otway mountain ranges, through central Victoria, through the Victorian Alps, large slabs of well-bushed South Gippsland, and right up into at least the Blue Mountains. Now, there doesn't have to be very many animals. Maybe if they were released or they escaped, you don't know. It may be that there is a contiguous population of these animals through that area. They have massive home ranges. All big predators have big home ranges. They, you know, sometimes hundreds of square kilometres, because they tend to be, it's not that there's not enough food, it's just that they tend to be aggressive with each other. They only come together for mating purposes, and a number of people have reported seeing an adult with a juvenile. Now that, once again, it starts to make you want to persist with getting to the bottom of something like this. From a wildlife point of view, and I think of myself as a field naturalist, I've got many more interests than just the panther phenomenon. Especially for me, marsupials are a big deal. In fact, I have my own herd of Bennett's wallabies at home. I take anything to do with large wildlife very seriously, but the panther phenomenon sticks in my craw all scale. Yes, it's rumours. Yes, there's a lot of good people claiming to have seen it, including some people that I will know. One of them was the late Senator John Butt. Another person is related to one of our recent Victorian premiers, and I can't name people for obvious reasons. They're entitled to their privacy. But these are people with something to lose. They don't want to look foolish, but they've been upset by what they've seen. Now, what I'll do, I mentioned hoaxes a little bit, but I suppose that the hoax thing, to me, is also a bit of icing on the cake, because it makes it more like a detective story when you've got to sort out a hoax. But there are a few other little things. What I'd like to do, could I have a volunteer from the audience, preferably somebody small, diminutive? Any takers up the back? No? Okay. Show me. You'll have to just write.
Right?
No.
The jacket, can I just see it?
Jacket, but
That's all.
But the scarf is the main one.
Oh, right.
Now, what I want to do, this is actually a cast of a mountain lion skull, which is roughly the size of a leopard skull. Now, what I want you to do is take your hair back. Now, this is not a massive animal. It would not have been as big as that toy that's on the back of the couch. Now, it's capable of a gape, okay, of that much, when it's in full killing mode. Now, bang, this puts it in perspective, or if it came from you from behind, similarly, crunch or crunch. And those are the three killing bites that are usually associated with leopards. I'm making a point here that if these animals are here, it's a serious piece of work if we've got them. There's no reason to ever think we're going to find the remains of one in the bush. You don't find much in the bush at any time. With Australia's acidic soils, something crawling underneath the bracken to die, the chances of finding it are absolutely remote in the first place. But I wanted to make that point about what these animals could be capable of. I have come across 3 reports of people who have been challenged by them, quite apart from the chap who made the report from Warburton years ago. The fellow at Warburton was with a team of blokes. The animal rushed out at them. Maybe it was defending a cub, who knows? No one knows. But the point is there are a series of witnesses. When it comes down to one chap in a hay shed at night, carting hay of an evening, he had a very powerful spotlight on his vehicle, and as he drove up to the shed, he was illuminating his hay before he started taking the bales out. And what he described as being a black panther, but the way he described its movements, he said, like quicksilver. And he could gauge its size against his bale of hay. He knew how big this animal was. And it was probably, I think, as he said to me, there was 1 metre and a bit of head and body, and another metre of tail. And he also said to me, the one thing that I noted when I saw one, it had incredible musculature. It's not a moggy. Now, downstairs, if you've had a look at the displays downstairs, there's a stuffed domestic cat, or mounted domestic cat, I should say. When you're walking out tonight, have a look at the size of it. They're dinky, pokey little things. And to date, there's never been a really big feral cat recorded in this country. Despite everything you hear and what you might see on the internet, there are no specimens. Specimens are everything. What we call biometrics. We must measure these things and we must have a specimen to be measured. We're left, once again, with only one little bit of hard data, a scat. A single scat. And that was just serendipity that we've got that now in the state collection. Now, I've finished with my ramble. So if there's any questions from the floor, I'd be happy to take them. Yes, please.
You're saying and there's these persistent rumours of American forces, particularly air forces,
yeah,
and pumas or cougars.
Yeah. And
you said before the range goes as far, which is a different animal to the black panther, obviously.
Yes, that's correct.
And you say the range goes up to Blue Mountains, yet there were large numbers of American Air Force units in Queensland.
Yep.
Place that comes to mind where I've spent a bit of time of late, Townsend. Why, if they had them in Victoria, haven't they got reports of similar animals in North Queensland, or just too much more bush from to hide in?
It may well be that. And a lot of people in the bush don't like to be thought of as, you know, they don't like to say too much. They like to keep things to themselves. And especially anybody with acres, it's their place, they run it their way, and if there's something there, it's their problem. They're very independent, as I'm sure you're well aware. I think I'm not chary of mascots being released or escaping, but I feel that there's insufficient evidence of it just being in relation to mascot releases. Now, you raise the issue of pumas. That is another issue. And we have a couple of hotspots in Victoria where there are claims that these animals exist and have been seen, especially the grandcats. Very much so. But I didn't want to confuse the issue too much tonight by bringing that in. But it may, no, please, it's good, because what it boils down to is the actual situation with escapees or releases is really where David's been shining. He has pulled out so much information about so much rolling stock of big cats in this country since I think the 1840s, 30s?
Yeah, Goldfields era.
Goldfields era primarily, when there was money floating around. And a lot of people, especially in the Western District of Victoria, were setting up magnificent properties with baronial mansions, and one of the big things to do was to have your own menagerie. Now, I've always had a pet theory, I can't prove it at all, that it wouldn't take too much, you know, a whiskey-fueled evening and some of the boys deciding to let something go to see what happens. If it happened to be a pregnant female, bingo, how interesting that would be. Probably going to court it, you know.
Well, we have
dead kangaroo hounds all over the
We
place.
have priors for that anyway. Just look at Austin and his rabbits.
Very much so. No, we don't talk about that, Geelong. Yeah, so look, I feel that the real issue here is that if it's ever going to be proven, it's hard science, we need specimens. Speculation's fascinating. Rumours should be listened to, but it's a specimen. How that would be obtained, I don't know, but DNA seems to be our biggest chance at the moment. And that's not very simple at all. We need more than one panther turd from the bush. We need a series of reports that are provable. Simple as that. Yes, any more questions, please? Yes.
Where was the scat found, and how can you be sure it was a cat scat?
It was analysed privately, both here and overseas, for its DNA, and the DNA report was written up on it. I can't say where because it's a privacy issue, but look at it this way, it's not that far away.
The report on the scat and the DNA I put in the Jeffrey Blaney collection at the University of Ballarat.
Yeah.
So you can come and have a look at the DNA analysis of that.
Yeah, it's preserved, and that's a stepping stone, as I say, one building block, but we need more.
Was it found near a kill? Like, if you were walking through the bush, why would you
It was associated.
pick it up and say, oh, this is a cat?
It was associated with the sheep kill.
Oh.
Now, one of the things about sheep killing that is a bit of a giveaway here is sheep. When dogs kill a sheep, and they can do it very efficiently too, and they have a big feed, a dog's stomach, even a big dog, it hasn't got a very big stomach. You know, when it's full, a fox's full tummy is about as big as my fist. A dog's stomach, you know, when your own dog has a meal, and it feels solid and hard, it doesn't expand the way the cats can. Not domestic cat, but if you, I was involved with the big cats in Melbourne Zoo for some time, and when you watch them eat, they can tuck it away like you wouldn't believe, till their belly is swelling. Now, cats are ambush predators. Canids or dogs are pursuit predators. A vast difference. Dog still has to be able to run even when it's had a meal. Cats just slink away and sleep it off. I would go so far as to suggest that one healthy adult, what we call panther, could clean up a 40-kilo wether sheep over two days or 3 days without anything, if nothing else is interfering with it. Now, that's just my own experience. I mean, you know, as I always like saying, I'm no expert, I'm not an expert, but I'm an enthusiast, and I think I'm getting a bit of information gathered that we sadly need. Now, when the government report was published, when I was talking to Dr. Mentors, it's very clear that the state government, even though it doesn't want to put any money into this, would really like to know, and a number of zoologists within government circles are extremely interested in the phenomenon. And in fact, they asked me to look at stuff, and I uncovered a recent hoax for them with somebody who's trying to have a crack at them. Okay? Yep.
I think it was a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, in the Golden Plains Shire, I seem to remember in the paper, and it was meant to be a foal. It was cleaned up overnight.
Yes.
Did you see that in the foal?
I saw the foal.
You did
Picked up pieces of the foal.
Yeah.
It was eaten overnight, which means it was likely to have been 2 animals.
Right.
And that was a
that
really...
was taken right down to the bone. I was just like, I think there were tooth marks.
That's a couple of years back. We didn't have access to doing the DNA stuff we have today. You know, the capacity to investigate. These days, if anybody rang me and say, "Oh, look, I've got a foal here," you know, they'll probably be in tears. They usually are. I mean, let's face it, it's horsey for donkeys, you can see it. But what happens is that's enough to really mean that somebody's going to want to gather up pieces and bury it quickly or burn it or whatever. When what I'm going to ask them to do is what they don't want to hear about. So I'm going to get you to cover that with alfoil. And I don't want anything to touch it. I don't want anything near it. I don't want you to touch it with your bare hands. But once again, you come across a situation where you can't